I didn't realize that Richard Petty was anything, until I was in the second or third grade.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cup Connection. I'm Mike Massaro. We've got a great guest today. You can see that's Kyle Petty. He's here with us. We're going to get to him right in just a moment. But first, I want to remind everyone, please hit like and subscribe if you enjoy what we do here on Cup Connection. We've had some great interviews over the past few weeks, and this is definitely going to be another one of them. So with no further ado, we introduce our guest. That's Kyle Petty. Kyle, tremendous to see you again.
Yeah, man, it is great to see you. Honestly, dude, it is great to see you. We've worked together. We've done some charity events for Joey Logano and some of those guys together, and our paths don't cross as much as they should, and as probably they could. When my kids get a little older, I got a 1, a 3, and a 5-year old, and we're going to swimming lessons a little bit later. So when they're out of the pool and life gets back to normal a little bit, we'll get together.
Well, I hope so. New Hampshire's coming up. Perhaps I'll scoot up there. It's only a couple hours
Yeah.
away from where I am in Connecticut, so maybe we can reacquaint for sure. Hey, let's get right into it. A big week in the Petty family. Richard Petty, the king, 86th birthday. I'm just curious. What do you do for a king's birthday?
You leave him alone. That's what my sisters and I, we all get together and it's like, what are we going to give him this year? Let's just give him a day of silence, a day away from all of us. But it is. I don't know. I mean, I think we just all get together, and then honestly, that's all you can give somebody like that. And I mean, he's done everything. He's been everywhere. He's starting his own wine company now. He's got a wine coming out the end of the month called Icon Wine. It's from Shelton Vineyards here in North Carolina. He wanted to stay in North Carolina, so it's not like we can give him a bottle of wine anymore because he's got his own stuff now. You know what I mean? So when you get into it, it's just spend time together.
Well, the perfect name, an icon. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah. Listen, we thought so. We didn't come up with it. I'm not gonna say we're marketing geniuses. The company came up with it, but we thought it was perfect.
is the bottle Petty Blue? What's it look like?
No, that's the interesting part, and I'm gonna take some credit for this one. I kind of designed the label. It's 7 bottles. They'll be spread out over a period of time, and basically we start with the first bottle, and the first bottle is just a white label with Petty Blue stripes, with just like a Petty Blue swoosh across it, kind of different, multiple layers. Because in 1958, when he started, that was it. Had a solid blue car with a 38 on the side of it, and then he went to 43 on the side of it. Then the next bottle comes out. It's Petty Blue and some white swishes intertwined. Then we get to 69 in the Ford, and we've got Petty Blue with the white and the dark blue swooshes. Then we get the STP, so we add some day glow. And we add some burgundy, and we add some silver for the 25th year, and we add some gold for 50 years of Petty Enterprises. So the label, as you set them all beside each other, the label begins to bloom a little bit. So and there's a story on the back of each bottle about what that one is. This is 69 when Richard Petty defected from Chrysler and went to Ford, and that's why this year was important. So it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool story. The wine tells the story.
Well, you can see right over here. I got a few bottles. They're my
Hey, we'll
collector
get you
bottles.
some.
I'll be.
We'll,
Yeah,
we'll get you
I'm
some.
expecting a bottle.
Yeah, I promise. I promise.
All right, great. Hey, big week in the world of NASCAR racing. Historic week, Chicago.
Yes.
What did you think?
You know what? I think it was a brave move to step out that far on a limb with NASCAR. I don't believe we could have done this 3 years ago with the old car. It had to be this car, and I think Van Gisbergen proved you had to do it with this car. I don't think Shane Van Gisbergen could, as talented a driver as he is, as world renowned as he is, could have gotten in those old stock cars that we run before and have done what he did. It's closer to an Australian supercar. It's closer to a German touring car. It's closer to that. So that opens the door. So that's one aspect of this weekend that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. I think it's opened the door to people from other formulas to come into this sport and be competitive on certain racetracks. They're not going to be competitive at Daytona and Talladega. Only fools are competitive at Daytona and Talladega, man, with the style of racing that we run there now. So they're not going to be that, but they can come in here. I think, and I said it before. There's big moments in this sport. The Streamliner, when Bill France sat down with Red Byron and Red Volt and all those guys and formed NASCAR. When the manufacturers really got into it, Carl Kiekhaefer and all those guys, when they really got into it in the late 50s, early 60s, when RJ Reynolds came into the sport, in the early 70s, it's a huge, huge blip and on our radar screen. In 79, flag to flag coverage, CBS, huge blip in this sport. And for a long time, we've just kind of floated along. Those were game-changing moments. I think this is a game-changing moment. This shows that if the community or the city will get behind it, we can bring these cars. NASCAR can bring these cars into the streets of Boston, into the streets of Miami, into the streets of Dallas, into the streets of Phoenix, and race there and not have to have a fixed facility. And I think that opens up the sport to, just like the LA Coliseum. If you can't get the fans to come watch your sport, take your sport to the fans. Take it to where they're at. And I think there's multiple ripple effects of what went on. But I think when we look back in 15 or 20 years, we're going to look at this as a very, very high watermark for our sport.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on everything you just said. Definitely a milestone for the sport. Definitely kind of opens things up for those folks from down under, if you will, who drive cars very similar in the V8 Supercar Series. Who knows what this may lead to in the future? You mentioned Boston. I know NASCAR's always wanted to go to New York. Maybe, perhaps this does that. So, but as good as it all was, and it was really, really interesting, is there anything you change moving forward? I mean, this was just race one on a street course. So, I mean, there's a lot of things I'm sure that people are already looking at.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of things people are looking at. I hated for the fans and for everyone. But in the end, I think it worked. It built the drama to start the thing in the rain, to start the thing on wet tires. That's something. So there's so many things we're not known for. You know what I mean? You have somebody come in and a road course and they call them ringers. Listen, this guy's not a ringer. He's a champion. He has won in everything. That's not and I've had this conversation with my colleagues and those guys. And I'm like, man, you guys about half portrayed it like this was just some smo off the streets of Australia that just come and kicked everybody's butt in cup racing. This guy's not a smo, man. This guy is he's the guy. He's the Kevin Harvick. He's the Kyle Busch of those series. He's the guy that wins races. So he was going to be competition right off the bat. But I think you look at the rain tires and stuff. I don't know what I would change. I don't enjoy for me the tightness of a road course. You know what I mean? The tightness is so you could not make a single mistake. But a lot of that had to do with the weather too. And it was kind of like Nashville. When the Indy cars first went to Nashville, the course was a little bit tight. They opened it up the next year. I'd like to see them open up at least a couple of the corners to have a little bit of high speed sweeping corners, more so than what we had. Most of the corners were tough right-handers that you just had to get into and get off of as quickly as possible. But if we could add a little chicane or a little something, I'd probably do that. Other than that, I'd add the sunshine. That's about it, man, because the people came. I mean, you saw it on TV. Yeah. There were people standing along a fence 6 and 7 deep. It reminded me of going in and out of the garage area at Daytona during speed weeks, because the fans just gather so they can see the cars, so they can feel the sound. And that's kind of what it looked like from the basic fans. Obviously, you've got the suites and you've got all this stuff for the high-end fans. But for the common fan, the regular fan, the guy that really makes this sport click, I think it was pretty cool.
All right. Well, you always bring the sunshine, so no worries there. Hey, I want to get into something I think so many people are curious about. That's growing up as the son of a legend. We talked about your dad having his 86th birthday this year. I want to go back in time a little bit. I want to go back to what it was like as a kid before you even drove a race car. What was it like going to the track with the guy that every fan wanted to meet?
You know what? I don't know, because it was just my normal. You know what I mean? It's just you grow up with it. If you live in the woods in a cabin and you don't have TV, that's your normal, man. So I kind of this it was, but I honestly say this, and this is true. I didn't realize that Richard Petty was anything until I was in the 2nd or 3rd grade, and I took a friend to a race in Greenville, South Carolina, to Greenville Speedway, Greenville Pickens, late 60s. It was still a dirt track. And we went down there, and this kid was just, his family were race fans. And they went all over and followed racing. But this kid was just enamored with everything. You know, he wanted to touch cars. He wanted to say, I'm like, it's just a race car, man. It's just a race car. It's got 4 tires, a motor in it. My dad gets in it and he rides around in circles. That's what he does. But this guy was just blown away. This kid was. And I think up until that time, I almost had the feel that almost everybody's father had a race car somewhere. You know what I mean? You didn't really talk about, you know, when you're in first and second grade, you don't talk about what your dad does or any of that. And you know, we grew up next to the race shop. There were always fans knocking on the door at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, right in the middle of dinner, wanting an autograph or a picture. My dad would get up, and you know, he was humbled that people would come to Level Cross, North Carolina in 1967 and knock on his door and ask for an autograph. So he always took the time with him. So, you know, he was just the guy. He was just the guy that drove the car. But it was Dale Inman and Wade Thornburg and Barry Dodson and Wayne Dalton and all those guys that worked on the cars. And I was there every day. I'd get off the school bus, man, and go to the race shop and hang out over there every day from the time I was in the second or third grade. So I don't he was just my dad. He was the good guy. My mom did all of this. She was the disciplinarian because
Of
my dad,
course. That's the
you know,
way it
during that
always is.
time, yeah, and you got to remember during that time, my dad would run. He could leave on a Wednesday or Thursday and wouldn't come back for a couple of weeks. You know, 2 or 3 weeks. He wouldn't come back. You'd run the, you know, Islip and Malta and Fonda and run the Northern Tour, and then they would head out to Michigan to race, and then they would come south down into Tennessee to race, and then he'd eventually come home. You know what I mean? But they'd run 3 or 4 nights a week too, so it was a different kind of racing. But that's what I remember most is the times that he came home, more so than the times that he went away.
Uh, you mentioned the people looking for his autograph. By the way, I got his autograph when I was 13 years old. It was at Daytona. I also got yours. I was 13 years old. I still have it. It's great. One of my
So
prize
sorry.
collections.
So sorry, man. So sorry. At least you got
So,
one good one.
well, you know, I treasure it because you're just a Hall of Fame musician. You know, I look behind you, I see those guitars, and I see that. Hey, you played the Grand Ole Opry recently, didn't you?
Yes, I did. That was my second chance, the second opportunity to do it. I have a show on Circle Network. I'm always hustling a side gig. You know that. I'm always looking for something. So I have a show on, and this is fascinating. I'm gonna jump into that one, man. I have a show on the Circle Network called Dinner Drive, and I get to pick people, and I get to go talk about a sentimental car, a car that was sentimental to them at some point in time in their life, and we're in our third season, just finishing up. We've done Terry Bradshaw, Darius Rucker, Ric Flair, Davis Love the Third, Herschel Walker, the Avett brothers. I mean, so many great acts and so many people. And there's only been two people who said their most sentimental car was the car they were just in. And that's Mario Andretti and Richard Petty. They have no sentimental car. I just kept having to dig and dig and dig. And Mario's car ended up finally, he said, if I had to choose one, I'd choose a 1944, a dark blue 1944. After World War II, where Mario lived in Italy, they were moved, and they had to move into Italy. And because Italy was part of the losing side of the war, or the side that was defeated, in a refugee camp for 6 or 7 years. And the American doctor drove a 1944 as he would come into the refugee camp to be there during the day. And that was America to Mario Andretti. That was so cool. My dad, he couldn't pick one. So I said, well, we're going to pick mine. And it was the 70 Superbird. And he let me drive it. After all these years, he let me drive his 1970 Superbird race car. And we went up the highway, down the main highway to a hamburger joint. We pulled into the parking lot in a race car, got out and had dinner, had a little lunch, had a hamburger and stuff, and came back. But it's a fun program. But that's been a cool thing to do.
Having lunch with so many legends, man. There's a lot of folks out there who are envious of that for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, I've got a question from one of our audience members. Brian on Facebook asks, did you ever consider getting out of NASCAR and doing some open wheel stuff, maybe some IndyCar, some kart racing?
No, not really. You know, it probably flipped through my mind, or fluttered through my mind, and in the early '80s when Tim came along, when Richmond came along, because he and I got to be pretty good friends. And he'd come from open wheel, from sprint cars. He was one of the first guys really that I knew that had ever driven sprint cars and midgets and stuff like that, open wheel modifieds, that kind of stuff, who had kind of come into the Cup stuff. And then his stuff at Indy. We spent a lot of time across, Gordon Johncock drove the Indy car for STP, and my dad drove this. So we spent a lot of time going back and forth. And you're young, and you think about it, but you know what? All I ever knew was stock cars. And I think you gravitate to what you know. Yeah, you'd like to maybe jump in and try it, and I never really went down that road to even ask somebody if I could sit in one and try it. You know what I mean? But looking back, that's probably I should have, because I've always been one of those guys. I'll try anything, but no, I never thought about switching over Cup racing. And if you look at my career, all I ever did was Cup race. I ran that one ARCA race and then jumped into a Cup car. And the only time I really ever run an Xfinity car or Busch car was after Adam's accident, because I filled in for him the rest of that year. I was a Cup driver. That's all I ever was. Not much of one, but I was a Cup driver, and that's where I started. It's kind of like starting in the major leagues, man. You just start at home plate, and that's it. And you try to figure out what you're going to do from there. And that's kind of the way I was.
I wouldn't sell yourself short. You do have 8 Cup wins. 8 Cup wins. A lot of people would kill to have 8 Cup wins for sure. Yeah. I definitely still admire everything you did in a Cup car. So, folks, I just want to talk to the audience real quick. If you haven't hit like or subscribe to our channel yet, please do. And make sure you look back at some of our interviews that we've done prior. We've done some really good ones. Last week, we had AJ Allmendinger. Prior to that, we had Jeff Burton. He had some great stuff to say about the season ahead. We had Mike Joy the week before that, who kind of recapped the season in itself. He's always interesting to talk to. And so please go back and look at some of those videos. So let's get back to Kyle. Kyle, I know you got to go. You got a big day ahead of you. I guess you got swimming lessons, right?
I get swim lessons. I've my 3-year-old Cotton and my 5-year-old Overton. We've been taking 5 or 6 weeks. It's amazing. First they wouldn't get in the water, and now they're fish. And that's the way it goes. It's like watching the transformation of a tadpole. It is crazy to watch what they've been able to do. And you travel so much, and that is one thing you talked earlier about my dad. When we did travel with him, we spent all of our time at hotels around swimming pools. Larry and Ricky Pearson taught me how to swim. They just pushed me off the high dive, and it was sink or swim. That's kind of the way it was. That seems to be the mantra of my whole life: sink or swim. We're just going to push you in the deep end. But exactly. I think, yeah. So I have enjoyed these little boys more than life itself. They are to be my age. And to have little kids, and obviously I'm remarried, and Morgan I love her so much, but just it is a breath of fresh air every day. It makes every day exciting and worth it.
All right, well, we're going to let you hit the pool. Thank you for joining us here today. Enjoy the rest of the season, Kyle.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me. I look forward to seeing you somewhere really, really soon, man.
Well, New Hampshire's coming up, hopefully there. All right, folks, thanks for joining us here on Cup Connection. That's all for this week. We hope to see you again next Friday here for another episode.